Okay, welcome to what is going to be an absolutely amazing session. I'm super excited and honored to have our guest today here with us. They're very well known in the industry, both in internet marketing and e-commerce. They provide a ton of different solutions and make really amazing, epic data solutions affordable and understandable for entrepreneurs. And, speaking from a position of experience, when we were really starting to scale up Beard Club, we really didn't know what was working and what wasn't working. We didn't have a clear picture of, what our acquisition costs are and what our true costs for like product and for manufacturing and for logistics. And it took us a while to really get a handle on things and to understand what our business was saying about what we were doing and whether that was working or not. So I think a lot of people get into a position where they're just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. But unless you know what really sticks, it's really kind of hard to make epic decisions. So I want to introduce AJ and Meaghan. Again, these two are just phenomenal people. Everyone that I know that I've referred them to has just been epically taken care of. And I love how you guys are just willing to help like people, whether they're just sort of getting started or whether they're just absolutely crushing it, and sort of have, an area of expertise you can pull on, and or whether it's content that you guys produce or it's boot camps or it's actual solutions and dashboards. You guys seem to have an answer for it all. So thank you so much for joining me and for providing the session today. I'm really excited for it.
Of course. Thanks for having us. And hi, everybody.
Yeah, glad to be here.
I'm AJ and this is Meaghan.
Yeah.
Awesome. So did you guys want to maybe take it over and grab the screen?
Yeah,
we can do that.
We'll go ahead.
Awesome.
So while
unless you had something before you pull up slides, I don't want to get in the way of your drive there.
Oh,
no, you're totally fine.
Awesome.
We can just kind of go at high level of what we want to cover today.
Yeah, I mean, really to start out, I think the foundation that we want to set is that data shouldn't be scary. Data is simply information. So if at any point people are like, oh, maybe this doesn't apply to me because I don't have data warehouses or whatever, data is simply information, and you have plenty of information in your business right now. So that's what we're going to talk on, is really how to utilize the information that you already have in your business to make better decisions and to get those insights you need to make better decisions than you're making right now off of maybe fragmented data or information.
Yeah,
right?
I think it comes down to, there are specific business questions that you may or may not be able to answer right now. And what we do is help you answer those business questions that are crucial to scaling your company. Whether you're just starting off in your e-commerce business or you've been doing this for a few years, this is going to be really helpful for you. So we want to really help with overwhelm and help you get on track to scale.
Yeah. So in order to simplify this, I know this looks like a lot, but it's really simple. This is just a roadmap to data mastery, right? When people think about big data, they naturally think about, the huge companies that are doing millions and millions in revenue, have an entire team of data scientists, and are just, really in the weeds, right? And they think of the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook. They think big data is this big, messy, scary thing. But what they don't realize is how much data can help them now. And really, there's a scale on this roadmap to data mastery, because the more information you have, the better decisions you can make. So with less information, you have worse decisions. So most companies start out here in like data infancy is what we call it. These are the startups, influencers, people who are, really trying to grow their business. But like you said, Alex, they're probably just guessing, right? They're seeing what sticks. They're trying things out. They're hoping and they're spraying and praying. But then what naturally happens is they start to get a little bit of a foundation. They start to realize through patterns, through reports, through just kind of digging in, that certain things are working better than others. And when they tweak their business to stop working on the things that are not working and double down on the things that are, that's when they're really able to scale. And then because they're now scaling and they have the revenue, they realize that what got them to this, new level of revenue is information. And so then they start investing more in gathering this information and really putting it as a priority. And that's when people are getting more optimized with their data, right? So this is simply just a journey to you becoming a better company and really just a better decision maker. So what we want to talk about is not the big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence stuff that you're hearing about, because it's not applicable and it's not needed to you. It'll just complicate everything and confuse you and make you feel like you're so dissociated that you can't do anything. There's a lot of stuff you can do now in order to build that foundation and to gain those insights. So that's what we wanted to spend some time on today.
I also wanted to say that also don't be thrown by the revenue on there.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's just
so we've found companies that are doing 50, 60 million, but they're still in the data foundation or data infancy stage. So it's not about the actual revenue. It's the practices. It's what type of data is practices are there or aren't there.
Yeah.
So don't worry about those numbers, but we want to help you get as far up this road as possible.
Yeah. So really,
so any questions on that, Alex? Just curious.
No, that's a perfect illustration. I love that.
Cool.
Perfect. So really, when it comes to data and information in even small businesses, it really starts with this, and this is data infrastructure at its very foundation. Every single technology that you're using in your business is a data collection tool. And they all are specifically designed to gather different types of data. So you've got your social medias, you've got your Google Analytics, AdWords, you've got your CRM, maybe an ESP, maybe a shipping provider, fulfillment, things like that, right? And you've got all of these separate, disparate systems that are all extremely valuable for doing what they're built to do. But on the back end, they're really not built to give you insights into all of your business because it's specifically designed for a piece of your business, right? So the problem is most clients will get on 5 to 12 technologies and then expect it to solve all their problems and to give them insights that they want. But it will never do that because HubSpot will only ever have the data that HubSpot collects. And GA will only have that data that GA collects. So what needs to happen is an amalgamation of all of these technologies or a combination of the data that's being tracked in all of them into one place. And so a lot of our clients start out by doing that in Excel spreadsheets or manually. That's the easiest way to gain these insights is just to do it yourself. Log into these systems, pull out the one number that you need from there, the one number you need from this one, the one number you need from this one, and then put it into a spreadsheet, right? So that's you extracting data. Then you end up transforming it. You ended up putting it in a way that makes sense to you, that makes business sense, that is organized by time or organized by division of your company, right? And you transform it so that it speaks the language that you want. And then you usually load it into a database, which is an Excel sheet, and then you run your analytics on it. This is simply just a fancy way of saying you're doing a calculation. You're either totaling or you're dividing to find your conversion rates, right? And then usually you'll do it in some sort of visual format that makes sense to you, right? People don't realize that's data infrastructure right there. That right there is a roadmap to success, and that is a great foundation to start with because these technologies are already gathering information and it has a lot of value in it. So if you did this manually, that is the very first step or I would say the second step. The first step is getting data collecting, right? So that's what AJ wanted to chat about.
And I think, well, the step 2 here, right in the middle, the automation and ETL area, this is a part that a lot of people don't talk about. So there's a big difference between single source dashboards and multi-source dashboards. What we mean is you can log into Facebook ads, you can log into Google Analytics, and you can literally have a dashboard that will bring everything into one place. So you have one login and you can see all the same things you could when you log into those apps in one dashboard. That's great. That solves one problem, which is getting everything in one place.
So those are called single source dashboards. Yeah. And there's a lot of visualization tools out there that will help you connect to Facebook data and replicate what you're seeing in Facebook, connect to Google, replicate what you're seeing there. But then those two things are very separate. They don't combine them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll just tell that story. Now, the multi-source is where it really gets fun. This is where it gets really interesting. This is where you can actually answer those business questions that you're coming up with in your mind instead of just the basic traffic and bounce rates and that kind of stuff. It's good to know, but it doesn't really take you that much further. So this is one of our favorite visualizations to show what that kind of step 2 is in ETL.
Yeah. So it's just an automation of, hey, when GA or any of my technologies out here on these outside rim, whenever these update, right, these green streams of data coming in, we want also this new data set to update, which would be a combination of the entire client journey, right? Because a client doesn't just go into one system. They first follow you on Facebook, and then maybe they click on a Google ad, and then they get into your email autoresponder list, and then they purchase on Shopify, right? And so what this is it's the automation of the combination of that data. as opposed to just logging into Shopify and seeing your Shopify dashboard
Right.
and just seeing that one single source.
Right. And there's also the word, we use it, Frankensteining together, right? Using Zapier like crazy to get everything talking to each other, just so that the technology is pushing around. When something breaks, you don't know where that breaks. So Frankensteining is a step in the right direction, but it's not foolproof. And what we're doing is, if you go back to that one,
Which one?
it's in, go back to the dashboard. There we go, this one. So all those disparate, on the outside rim, all those disparate technologies are not talking to each other except through the Zapier. Even though that data is being transferred, you have to figure out where you actually going to make your decisions from, okay? Because it's talking together, but it's not being put into a visual that will work for you. In the middle rim, in this area where you can see, you can click on one of them, this is pulling all of your data into one database, one place where you can mash everything together. This is the big difference. And it's not something that's really technical. It's just something that has to happen to make your life a lot easier, and you can automate the rest of it once it's in one place.
So we're starting with the end in mind and letting you know what is possible when you do all of these things. But in a minute, we're going to reverse engineer this and say, what is step 1? What is step 2? And what is step 3 that you should follow, no matter where you are in this sequence of data maturity. So this is the kind of end result that you really want, which is actionable insights into what's working and not working in your business. Looking at your LTVs and your 1 day, 30 day, 60 day.
Let's make sure everybody knows what LTV is. That's lifetime customer value, right?
Yeah.
It's also LCV. There's a lot of different ways to put it, but a lifetime customer value is a metric that every single business owner, marketer needs to know.
And then over time, those trends are my marketing efforts increasing or decreasing that LTV? And then what sources are yielding the highest LTV, right? What campaigns, what products are, the best tripwires in order to get people to come back and purchase more, right? So in order to gather these kinds of insights, first you have to have this foundation, right? So now let's kind of step backwards in time. So before you've gone and done all this whole data infrastructure and automation, or even just the manual combination of this data, before any of that is possible, this output is only possible if the input is good, right?
And the input is tracking. That's what we call tracking. And like Peter Drucker said, you cannot manage what you don't measure, right? So to simplify this, if you don't have the data tracking correctly, from your visitors to your ads to anything else that's going on, you're not going to be able to answer the business questions you're trying, like LTV or multi-source, channel attribution, or any of the other business questions. QuickBooks has to be set up right for your finances to be right? The chart of accounts, all of those things. So each of these technologies has their own setup or their own foundation you have to have. So what we always bring people back to is say, okay, there's some amazing tools out there that do not cost a lot of money. We believe highly in Google Analytics. It's one of the most important softwares you can use when used right, when used with professionals. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go learn it yourself, because I really don't recommend that. None of us do. But you need to find the right partners to help you do this for your website. So to get your tracking set up correctly, in 4 simple steps, number 1, you want to get an account with Google Analytics if you haven't already. That is 1 account per, I don't know if you have multiple different domains or what, but you want to have 1 main account that you have everything underneath.
And you can set up different views for different pages or whatever it is to have that kind of separation.
Some people have subdomains. And Google Analytics works really well with Shopify and other e-commerce companies, where you can integrate it so that they can kind of naturally integrate that for you, and you don't have to do any extra steps except for set it up. But number 1, you've got to get your account set up. Number 2 is you got to set up the goals within Google Analytics. So the goals being, your physical products, your funnels, the different steps. We don't have to get into the details, but you really need to set up goal conversions inside of Google Analytics to be able to track.
Or event tracking, right? There's several ways to skin the cat, as they say. And so you can do event tracking, you can do custom goal setup. It really just depends on what you want to know. But you can also do, well, we'll get into the UTMs in a minute.
Yeah, we get into those. But then, so get that part done first. Then you want to use something called Google Tag Manager. Now, Google Tag Manager is really, it's free, and it's really valuable, because instead of going on all of your web pages or your WordPress or whatever your site's on and pasting each Google Analytics code and Facebook tracking pixels and other softwares that all require you to, hey, just paste this on your website. This is like the hub or the portal where you can put all those scripts. It doesn't matter if it's Google or not. This is a universal tag manager. So you can put anything from any other company software in here. It creates one snippet of code that's on your page, and it allows all of those pixels to fire automatically. But you have one console to manage it from. Very easy to set up as well. You can start the account and then hand that over to a team to create that for you. So that's step number 3. And last but not least, I mean, Alex, we'd probably agree that most people are advertising on Facebook because that's where a lot of people are. It's a great place to start. So this can be, number 4 can be Facebook pixel or any other pixels you're using to advertise on. But you want to get the tracking pixels created in your business manager on Facebook, and that also goes in the Google Tag Manager.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the biggest mistakes that anyone makes, and we will go into companies that are doing, hundreds of millions, if not billions in revenue, and they make this mistake as well. They just assume that everything is being tracked. And then we'll come in and they're saying, I need to know this answer to this question and I need to know it now. And then we dig in and we're like, well, you're not tracking it. So how can you get the answer if you're not even asking the question, right? And so that's one of the biggest things is let's begin with the end in mind, and go back to these sources of insight, right? All of these data collection technologies, and make sure they're collecting information right now, because you can always set it up now, even if you're not ready to do all this analysis and automation or even manually. Set it up so that it is tracking, because you can never go back and gather historical data. You can't create it from scratch, right? So even if you're not ready to invest in analyzing the data, first just start collecting it. You can always go back and analyze it later, right?
Yeah, I think to be even more specific, like literally inside of some of these applications, it could be as simple as one little checkbox that you haven't check marked. So it's about kind of time blocking the time and saying, hey, I'm going to work with my team or just myself or a support person and say, I'm going to block out this time to make sure that, Shopify is set up all the way through. I'm going to go through some of the support docs or whatever, or assign it to somebody on your team and say, hey, just go through their check marks on, are we tracking everything? And it's usually better to track more than you need right now than nothing, right? So Google Analytics is even more important. So you can go get an account and then put that script on your page and then be like, oh, I'm set up for Google Analytics. That's a big mistake. There are so many more things that you need to do in order to grab all of that data so that 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, you have that data that you really need then. So this is beginning with the end in mind. So it can be those little tiny details that you need to make sure are tracking here.
Yeah. So that's all tracking. Now, one of the things that I think is really helpful to go through as an exercise is it's called metrics mapping, right? If you don't know what you need to be tracking, a very easy exercise is just to write down the business questions that you have, right? And then reverse engineer those into KPIs or into actionable metrics, right? Anything that's measurable and that has numbers associated with it, right? So if you want to double your revenue from Facebook next year, what are the things that have to happen in order for that to be achievable? And then go through each of those KPIs and see if you have that tracking right now in any system. And if not, then that gives you a good action list to go and start tracking, right? So we call that metrics mapping. And even if it's not something that you do right now, if you don't have the tracking set up, this is a good exercise to do. So start with your business goals. Ask what business questions do you need to answer in order to hit that business goal. Turn those into these metrics. And then see what connecting technologies you need in order to have these metrics and have all the data for these metrics. And if there are some that are missing, then hey, maybe we need to implement a different CRM that has that ability, right? And it might not be something you do now, but you know that it's on the roadmap for success. And that will help you get that foundation now for future growth. Right?
Yeah, the top 4 are the most important. Business question, identifying the specific metrics that you need to be looking at now, and not 100 metrics. We're talking about what are the 5 to 10 needle movers. Now we have our recommended ones because we work with hundreds of companies. So we know what really companies should be looking at in the beginning, but then by mapping it to that technology source, you're finally getting clear on, oh, I know where that lives, as opposed to kind of guessing and just exporting reports and throwing it together in a spreadsheet. This is a conscious process of creating the mapping so that you're clear.
Yeah, and another way to do that is just map out the funnel. Make a diagram and be like, hey, where am I tracking this, right? We need to know the entire funnel, how things are converting. So let's just map it all back out to our technologies and make sure it's being tracked somewhere, so that eventually when you're asking all of these questions about conversions or about, you know, overall LTV or whatever it may be, you already know that there's a hole in the tracking, or that it's being tracked there.
Yep.
Right?
How's that so far, Alex?
This is great. Yeah. I feel like this is an important process to go through too. Even if you're, say, writing out what those big questions are, you might start to go into the other steps and be like, oh, well, maybe this actually isn't something I can focus on right now because I have to integrate a new CRM to get there. Let's focus on this other area because that's going to help us generate revenue and then be able to afford this sort of next step. Even that process just kind of puts things in perspective of like, hey, where can I put my limited time and energy into right now? It's going to create the biggest result for me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Glad you said that.
Yeah, and it's simply about mapping it out, right? So looking at what is going to bring me the most business value. Is it that implementing that CRM because then it's going to gather this data, or is it, you know, the other options, right? How valuable is this to my business? Is it going to help me increase revenue or decrease waste? Mm-hmm. And then how feasible is it, right? So this is what we do with all of our clients is we map out, we make that little metrics mapping, and then we map it out. We say, how feasible is it right now with the systems you have in place, the tracking that already exists, right? And if it's super valuable and is feasible, then it lives in this quadrant 1, and that becomes your first priority. This becomes the metrics that you can track now. This becomes the stuff that your team can manually pull in order to give you those insights. And then priority 2 is the things that are also very valuable, but might not be feasible yet, right? We haven't necessarily implemented the CRM or the tracking. So what happens is naturally over time, you're moving these little KPIs over up in feasibility over into this quadrant. And then once they become here, then you can integrate that into your weekly reports or monthly reports or your dashboard, right? So, and then if it's low business value, then it's not necessary, or it's a low priority. And so you just don't focus on those things, even though it's a nice to have, right? Like there are so many vanity metrics out there that people are obsessed with that don't move the needle. They're not that important, yet somehow it's become, just because it's feasible, they have it. They're like, oh, well, now it's a focus.
Video views is a great one of those.
What was that?
Which one?
Video views is something we fell victim to. But
yes,
I think this is super, super important too, because most entrepreneurs like myself, we have, you know, shiny object syndrome, and there's all of a sudden we hear about this sexy new software that's going to be the savior of our business, or, you know, like this cool new event we can sponsor or whatever it might be. Something comes into the field and you're like, wow, this is going to change everything. But then when you actually look at it from this level, you're like, oh, well, this actually, you know, this isn't going to provide a ton of value, and it's actually going to be really hard to implement. It's not really feasible to do right now. So you have to come to that, you know, knowledge at some point, whether it's through actually doing it and failing or doing it and it taking a long time, and then realizing, oh man, we actually should have been focusing on this. So I think it's like, this is a process that's why I'm like smiling this whole time, that we had to go through, where a lot of the things that came up that were super exciting actually led us down rabbit holes that weren't profitable or just weren't productive, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly why we exist. We are here to help businesses reduce or eliminate waste. And that's wasted time, energy, or money. Those are the biggest things that we all have. And so those are very precious when you're starting out and you don't have the budgets of bigger companies. Yeah. So this process, this Pareto's Law, 80-20, vanity metric, there's tons of metrics out there you could be looking at. And there's a lot of dashboards, a lot of people out there preaching, oh, it's only $19.99 for get 250 metrics for all your stuff. You just point and click and connect your Facebook. You're like, this is way overwhelming. Yeah, it's $20 a month, but you're not going to get the value. It's not a priority 1. Yeah. It's the single source metric. So eliminating waste, being very, very cautious about what you're choosing to do, and leading with revenue. That's our phrase. Lead with revenue and identify those metrics that will move the needle for you now. Then later on, you can always add other metrics or get rid of them. Businesses are organisms. Metrics or organisms are always going to be changing throughout your I think about every 90 days, our companies come back to us and be like, hey, this was awesome, but now we're doing this, and let's tweak it this way. So it's always changing.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point too, because we see a lot of people get caught up in paralysis by analysis too, right? They're constantly going in and they're looking at these things like the video views or the counts. And then
ego boosters.
Yeah, but then what action are
deflators.
you going to take off of it, right?
Yeah.
And they're not looking at things that are actual needle movers. And so with every single metric that you define in your organization, it's okay. So what happens if this goes up? What happens if this goes down? Who is personally responsible for the success of this metric, right?
Yep.
Having clearly defined responsibilities and roles and also action steps helps make sure that you're not creating things that are vanity, right? That are just for the sake because it's feasible and it's easy, right? So that's one thing that we definitely recommend is whenever you do this metrics mapping, whenever you are just looking at the questions that you're going to answer through data, is this solving a problem, right?
Yep.
Cool. So, I mean, we've covered a lot when it comes to that. I mean, the biggest thing that we run into is when you're in these stages, you really need to work on the tracking component, make sure that that is set up because the data later on will be extremely valuable. So make sure that the tracking is your number one priority. Then number two is making sure that you know where you're heading so that you can start tracking the right things, right? And then number three is simply you can start tracking this stuff manually. You can have your VA or somebody go through and start pulling these numbers. And what naturally happens is as they're pulling those numbers manually, they realize, oh, well, I don't know the formula, or I don't know where this lives, or this is missing, right? So it helps you fill those gaps in before you have to go and spend a lot of money on some BI tool to do this automatically. And so what that does is that helps you roadmap out and define how you define, like so many clients come to us and they say, well, you need to tell me our allowable cost per acquisition. Like, great. So how do you define customer acquisition costs? I'm like, well, like everybody else does. Okay. So does that include obviously the marketing spend, but do you also think that it should include the marketing agency cost? They're like, oh, well, yeah, that would be nice. Okay. Should it also include the cost of the goods sold? Oh yeah, well, that would be good too. What about the technologies that you're using to run the marketing department? Oh, I guess that would be helpful too, and they just haven't thought about what does this formula mean in your business? Because every business suffers from terminal uniqueness. You're dying because you're the only company out there that is exactly like this. You're the only one who uses your technologies like this. But then you're the only one who's getting in your way because you're not clearly defining what you define these numbers as, right? And every customer is different. Like, does it include shipping? Does it not include shipping expenses, So by doing this manually first, that's a great, great step. And if you are already doing this manually, that's awesome. The next step is simply the automation visualization. So it's a very easy, progressive step going up this roadmap, right? It's not too much to take on. You don't have to do all this stuff at once. It's simply get the tracking, define the KPIs, and then you'll automate it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good summarization.
I'm sort of like smiling, looking at like these diagrams and stuff and just thinking about our own progression with everything too, because we realized we weren't tracking enough stuff. Actually, we hired a guy named Brett who you guys have talked to, and he was just like incredibly intelligent. Really, he's like, guys, we're not making any decisions based on data. There's all these like shiny objects and, we're kind of flowing through that. So he started compiling all of these into Excel. And I think I told you guys before, we actually bought a designated Beard Club Excel PC computer because we couldn't pull sheets fast enough. And the data became really big, really quick. But it was interesting to see our progression of like, hey, we're not tracking anything all. Okay, now we're starting to plug different things into this mix. And okay, wow, now we have like a lot of data and we're not really sure what's working and what's talking to each other. None of us really talking to each other. We're just trying to make these calculations. And I just wish that we met you guys a lot sooner than we did, but everything happens for a reason. I had to learn these lessons the hard way.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to do is we really want to, in the past, we've only worked with big clients like that, right? Because we wanted to help them with these custom implementations and really solve these big problems. But what we found is the bigger the company, it doesn't matter because they're asking the exact same questions that small companies are. The questions do not change. It's how much should I spend to acquire a customer? How much are my customers spending once they're with me? And what should I do? What's working and what's not working with my product and my audience? And we're like, well, geez, everybody has these issues. Everybody has these questions. Now let's start working with the smaller customers so that we can provide them with those answers, because the answers exist. The data's already there. It's already tracking, but people just dissociate because they're like, oh, that's big data. I'm not ready for it. It's like, dude, your cell phone has big data in it. Everybody has, like, we worked with a client. Oh, I was dying. He was like, we connected to his sources, and in one system, we pulled out 4 million rows of data, and that was only like 3 to 6 months of purchase history. And he goes, I refuse to believe that we have that much data. I'm like, I didn't type up 4 million rows of data. But that's what happens in the back end of these systems. It's all tracking. You would not believe how much data and how much information is already there, hidden, waiting for you to just explore it, right? So big data is not a scary thing. Big data is the difference between an e-commerce company scaling and an e-commerce company stagnating. Yep. Because if you're not looking at your data, if you don't know what's working and you don't know what's not working, and you're just spending money and hoping it works, your competitor knows these things. They know what's working. They know what's not working. They're cutting those ties, and then they're doubling down on what's working, and they're going to beat you because they're smarter with their information and they're making better decisions, and you're just guessing.
And people are getting better and better with data slowly, right? So what we do want to make sure you do is not look at this as an overwhelming thing, and don't put it off. Don't keep saying, oh, well, I'll handle it next year, or I'll handle it in the next 6 months. Now is the time to start doing something, at least. Start tracking certain things. There's a great...
It's like planning for your retirement. You got to start now.
Start now. Compounding interest doesn't help you if you don't start investing now. So it is a compound investment movement for yourself. There's, even if you, like Airbnb and other companies have identified their North Star metric. What is the one metric you could start with right now that if it goes up, everything else doesn't matter or not? Like, so for Airbnb, it was nights booked, right? Nights
Facebook
booked.
is active daily users.
Active daily users. Every large company has OKRs or KPIs that is the most important. So start with, start with that. Yeah, start with something that you can track and you can know. And also, another tip is if you're in emails and maybe you're using Klaviyo or MailChimp or whatever, but you want to be able to make sure when you're sending out those emails and they have buy buttons in there, you can link the revenue to that specific subject line or that specific email. What is working? It's getting really, really detailed in every single communication, every single social post. Having those, we didn't really talk about the UTM codes, but UTM links are specific links that can track back to the source of that action you took, so that you can see if it was actually profitable or wasted.
And it is powerful. I mean, so, and let me bring up another thing is standard operating procedures.
SOPs.
Yeah. So you can literally create 1 million different UTMs, one for every podcast you're on, one for every single Facebook post, every single ad, every single email you send out, right? You can create millions of UTMs. But if your structure on each of those has like source, medium, and campaign and different orders, and sometimes you use a plus, sometimes you use a capital, sometimes you use this, right? And it's not standardized, you will gather zero insights from that. So whenever you're implementing a new technology or a new tracking mechanism, make sure that from the get-go, you're clearly defining what the standard operating procedure is. Yep. And if it changes down the road, that's okay. You don't have to know everything from the get-go, but at least follow some hierarchy or structure, because it will make your life and our lives easier when you are getting to the point where you want to gather insights from it, because it's so important to have it clearly communicated.
I'm glad you said that too. We actually have an amazing presentation on like process development and documentation. Like it's an early part of this. And like, it's super important because, like one of the things that you guys preach to is that you should not have to worry about being so down in the weeds. You should be worried about the big decisions, but this is something that you can outsource. Like you don't need to make 100 UTMs a day when your company is growing. Like this is something that somebody else should be doing. And as long as there's a, documented process for this, then they're going to do it properly. And it's not going to duplicate all of these errors and just make it messy and stuff. So I'm glad you touched on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we get a lot of clients who use like 6 different marketing agencies, right? They've got one that's doing just Facebook ads, one that's specializing in LinkedIn or YouTube, right? And then what happens is they're all using their own internal processes because the client hasn't clearly defined what they want.
Right.
Even if you just take one of them as a template, and there's a lot of templates out there, right? And just say, hey, look, when you're working for me as my agency, I need you to follow this procedure because we're using that across the board. And just saying, here's the standard, right? And then you can always optimize it, but even just having it in one place is important, so that it's the one reference for anybody who comes in, and then you don't have to retrain everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a good structure for the order of operations and what you need to do in order to become more data mature. Obviously, as you move up this map of data maturity, when you're down here, pre-built dashboards are actually valuable when they're multi-source, right? So pre-built dashboards can solve your needs as long as they're pulling from all of your separate technologies. But the problem is most pre-built dashboards on the market right now are pre-built and they don't have any flexibility in them, right? And so what happens is people get sucked into it saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this awesome dashboard, but then they have zero customization or it doesn't map back to their specific technology technology stack. Mm-hmm. And so then they're stuck in that, and then they have to leave and then go create their own custom dashboard down the road. So, pre-built dashboards are good in the beginning to really give you some basic insights. And then eventually as you scale up, you'll need to customize. We believe in not having to change systems and switch and have to rebuild everything from scratch each time. So we believe that you should start and begin with this end in mind. Get on the technologies and the platforms with which you can grow and that can scale with you. So there's a lot of different tools out there for the automation and BI and reporting. We're partners with a lot of BI tools out there, and we've used a lot of them. And really, our favorite, we love Domo. We are certified resellers and partners with Domo because it's something that we can package and get people that are still small, they can still afford it. And then as they scale, it grows with them. And we're able to provide them some pre-built dashboards that we've already built for a lot of other e-commerce companies.
That are valuable.
They're valuable.
The real metrics we really want you to be looking at. We've pre-built those as proven, we've proven it with lots of customers. So
yeah.
Ours are not the vanity metrics. It's this kind of stuff. Actual LTV.
The things that move the needles.
Subscription data. Subscription's huge, right? Most companies, we believe all companies should have subscription part of their business, at least some sort of an offer. There's a ton of data there to be able to figure that out.
But we believe that you should start with these big needle movers in these pre-built dashboards. And then as you need it, then add in the customization. Yep. Too many people just kind of jump up here and they bite off more than they can chew. And then they get overwhelmed because they're like, oh, now I have to go and create all this custom stuff. It's like, well, let's start with the needle movers. Let's start with the things that you need now in order to scale and grow. And then you can afford to build everything from scratch. Not to mention the cost.
Either people have dashboards or business intelligence platforms that are too inexpensive and they're too small. And then the other ones are just too expensive and it requires lots and lots of labor, but they don't know that going in. So that's the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, we've literally done all of the above. Strung together spreadsheets and then into like building our own data solutions with these really expensive platforms. And then ended up talking to you guys and simplifying things considerably. But yeah, it's great analogy, fantastic way of showing it.
Good. Yeah, we're glad to help. And this is what we're passionate about. We're really passionate about helping business owners and marketers make better decisions from the information that already exists out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other people have already done this. And so we just enjoy that education component and really helping people understand what that roadmap looks like and what those actionable bite-sized steps are that they can take instead of eating the whole elephant, just take those individual bites and it's a lot easier than you think. Awesome.
Well, I'm a huge fan of you guys. And like I said, anyone that I've ever sort of pushed your way has been like, holy crap, I'm so glad I spoke to them. Like, what are some of the best ways that people could reach out to you? Or I guess like, how would they know the best way to work with you depending on what stage they're at? And like, I guess, what are the certain levels that you guys get into working with people on, whether they're a beginner or whether like, doing 6 figures a month and they're like, crap, I can't get past this like plateau. I need to see better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we like working with people at all stages in data maturity. So if companies are down here in data infancy, then we can help set up Google Analytics correctly. So we do Google Analytics audits, Google Analytics implementation as well, so that we can just set it up for you with the end in mind and ask you those important questions so that you're at least tracking the data now. So that's kind of the first way to work with us. Then once people have that in place, then the next thing is with these pre-built dashboards. So we've already worked with a ton of the top big e-commerce companies in the world right now. And so we've utilized and we've learned from every custom implementation that we did from them and distilled it down to some pre-built dashboards that answer the most important business questions that the top companies are asking. And we've packaged it in a pre-built way. So then that's the second way, is like, if you're already in that stage where you're like, I just need to know this stuff, I just am doing it manually, or man, I'm not even doing it manually, but I know the data is there, and we can help you with the pre-built dashboards. And then if you're already past all that and you just need somebody to go and do all the custom stuff because you're like, look, we know exactly what we need, and here's the KPI, and here's the definition, here's the formula, but I need it automated, we can do that too.
And you don't want to hire very expensive, people internally, because data people can be very, very expensive just for one. So we have a scalable and leveraged team that we've built over time with data scientists, dashboard engineers, data analysts, all of the people you would need to be able to not only get the custom dashboard done, but also help you with the insights.
Yeah.
And then also there's the people that kind of don't know what they don't know. There's the starting point of, hey, I just need to help understand this world and what I need to go do. And that's where our data education comes into play. We have a data-driven bootcamp, as we like to call it, which is kind of like what we did here, but like a lot more. And we simplify it and put it into a system for you so that you go through a bootcamp, then you're like, you know exactly what you need to go do next.
Yeah, so we do education or we do consulting too. So we can be an outsourced data team for the people who need that work done, but we can also teach them how to fish. So if you've got some nerd on your team who's awesome, but they don't necessarily know all this, or they're just overwhelmed, right? We can come in, we can help educate and be the overflow, or we can help you guys as you hire that person, we can help train them on these best practices. And if we built all these custom dashboards, we can hand it over to them and train them on how to take it over, because we don't want people to have to rely on us for everything. Really, our goal is to get them self-educated so that they're on their own, and eventually they hire their own person internally to do all of this. And then we're just here for consulting or implementation if they need that help. So at any stage in this, we're able to kind of fill in the holes and really just help them get where they need to be.
Is there anything you guys don't do?
In these there's a lot of stuff we don't do.
We don't implement CRMs. We don't
right.
tell you what technologies we've worked with in the past that had way better tracking or data, right? Because we have the unique insight into working with hundreds of companies. And so we've seen what they're doing that works and doesn't work. We know what it means to get data out of Infusionsoft versus Maripost. Like we've seen, the hurdles of, Amazon doesn't provide any of that personal data. So how do you get past that and do LTVs even though you don't have the email address, right?
Yeah.
So all of those questions of walls that people get into, we've dealt with those, like ClickBank nightmares, And so we're able to help bring that industry knowledge as well.
That is so awesome. Guys, I really appreciate it. This is super helpful. Amazing, like high level. I love starting with like the end in mind. That's sort of what I preach in all the different areas of this program is like, understand the big picture, and that you don't necessarily have to get there right now, but you need to understand where you're going in order to get there, and then start with, where it makes sense and bring the right people onto the team, or, outsource this to the right people and not have to try and do all these different things at once, but know where you're going is the most important thing. And this, obviously this is super applicable because this is how you get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're glad to help. Thank you so much for having us on.
Always
As you can tell, we are passionate about this. We are total nerds, and we love making an impact, and we really love seeing the domino effect that it has, and seeing customers turn around funnels that were stagnating, that they were going to kill, and then watch them scale and grow. And it's really, really fun to help people up this roadmap to data mastery. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Always appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.